SC Media is proud to present this month's CISO Stories program, hosted by yours truly, Jessica Hoffman. This is a show where CISOs share tales from the trenches and unpack leadership lessons learned along the way. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, please visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CRC. Welcome, greetings, everyone. We're having a next month's episode for the CISO Stories podcast. We got the amazing Jadee Hanson with us today. How you doing, JD?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Our topic for this month is protecting application user data for better privacy, governance, and compliance. I think when we had our prep call, you said that's basically everything, right? That's what we do with GRC. But I'm really excited to talk to you because you are the CISO for Vanta, which is a GRC company. And it's like you have double duties. And you mentioned you're like patient zero for this company. You really embrace it. Otherwise, your product wouldn't be so successful. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first off, Vanta is agentic trust platform. We recently launched our agentic trust platform in order to help enterprises manage trust at scale. So prove trust to other companies. Every single day, our mission is to help every business earn and prove trust. So big, large customers use us to support kind of every function of their GRC team in order to turn everything that they're doing internally around and prove that to customers that want to buy their solutions or engage with them from a company perspective. Myself, I lead our security and technology teams, and I get to use the product internally. So I am customer zero. My GRC team uses every function of the product. It provides us with a really interesting opportunity. Not only are we yes, we're the GRC team at Vanta, but we get to play a role in so many different parts of the business because of what we're building. And so my strongest partner at Vanta is our chief product officer, who I work very closely with to use the product and then help influence and guide the roadmap. And then we also just get a chance to talk to customers. And every time that we talk to customers, it's really fun because we're not only talking to customers, we're kind of benchmarking with teams that look just like our team. And so we get to share a bit of how we're using the Vanta product and understand how they're running their GRC teams as well. So really fun role.
Yeah, I have a GRC background too, so I was kind of geeking out about this. It sounds really fun to be able to leverage the product that you're selling. I feel like that puts a lot of trust, as you said. You want that, and that's what you're doing. You're building trust within your customers for their customers. So you mentioned working closely with your product team there as well. They're underneath you. You said security, your privacy.
Yeah, I have security, privacy, as well as our IT team. And then I have a really interesting team. It's kind of unique to Vanta. I don't know that anyone has ever done this in other companies, but it's kind of genius. I have a number of GRC folks that are subject matter experts, and they are broken into two teams. One is a bunch of GRC folks that are helping to influence the product, and the other group is helping our sales team. So one helps go to market, one helps product. And if you think about just the detailed work that goes into GRC, you need somebody who fully understands the frameworks and the controls and how everything connects together to really make that come to life in a product. And so instead of hiring people and trying to teach them everything GRC, we've hired GRC subject matter experts to help influence pieces of our product. So when you grab a framework out of Vanta, that framework was built by somebody that has a GRC experience from my team.
Well, let's talk about frameworks for a second. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you all follow you and your team, and thanks for that because I do think that is
Uh-huh.
really unique that you're able to see across all those groups and seeing everything come together. So you mentioned before about in our prep that you follow the NIST CSF framework for how you're baselining and benchmarking internally. Let's talk about that. Why did you pick the NIST CSF out of all the frameworks there, and how has that been as far as implementation, and what have you seen from success from some of your team that are GRC professionals?
Yeah, this is very timely because we just did our quarterly check-in yesterday, so fresh for top of mind. It's really interesting. When I first started at Vanta, we actually used the ISO model, and so we did the ISO model for a full year. And during that year, NIST CSF was updated with the new govern section of NIST CSF. And when that update came out, it really changed the game. Like that was definitely the better framework, just more robust, a lot more specific. And so we've taken the NIST CSF. We do have this available within the Vanta product as well, but we've benchmarked our entire program off of the NIST CSF. And what this means in practice is we take each of the different areas. We take each of the control families, and then underneath each of those, we look at those once a quarter and we define kind of where we are from a maturity standpoint. And we've like custom built like maturity models tied to each section. And then each one of those analyses it uncovers, I'm sorry, details on like what we should do next and like what are the gaps that we should go and fix. And so we go through this like analysis once a quarter. We get a benchmark of kind of where we are. We get a number of things that we have to go and do to get to the next level. And then slowly you see this like program, this large scale program mature over time. We've been doing this now for 2 years, and I just did the cut last night of January of last year to today, and there's so many little things that go into moving the needle when it comes to like maturity, but just really astounding to see the progress that the team has made just from a year ago.
Yeah, I am a fan of NIST in general, but I think CSF is really great at that benchmarking and just looking at it once a quarter. Is that what you would recommend? Just curious as far as your customers, because I'm sure that the GRC platform from Venta product has all the baselines, but your company and your again, I feel like you have such a unique perspective because you're using this tool, and then you're able to actually, when you market, can say, this is what we're using internally. We're using the NIST CSF, and for these reasons. Is that something that you share with your clients and suggest that they start there, especially with some of these smaller businesses?
Yeah, this is a great question. It kind of depends on your company, but for a company that has more than one framework and certification that they need to maintain, and has lots of customers asking about maturing the program and everything else, I would 100% recommend NIST CSF and that maturity model overall. We actually have resources on the Vanta website where you can grab them and you can do kind of your own self-assessment. And so I would definitely recommend checking those out. If you're a company of 10 people and Vanta has lots of customers that are very small like that, the NIST CSF might be a bit of overkill for you. If you're working on your very first certification, I would benchmark against that and keep the focus. For us at Vanta, we maintain 5 different ISO framework certifications. We have SOC 2, we have FedRAMP, and so the NIST CSF is a fantastic way for us to kind of measure maturity across everything versus just like one.
Let's talk about vendor risk management for a moment. It sounds like you have a wide array of customers, users of your software, the tool itself, and you just mentioned, and I totally agree. Baselines or your frameworks definitely depend on the data types that you're transferring, processing, and storing, as well as federal regulations and all that good stuff. But when it comes to vendor risk management, what are your thoughts on that? Again, you have vendors, right? You rely on vendors the same way. So how has that been an integral part of how you're protecting your customer data as well as internally?
Yeah. I feel like I could talk for hours on vendor risk management. So let's like back up for just a minute. This is something I'm very passionate about fixing in our industry. I think this process has been largely broken to date. It is too focused on static assessments that are rubber stamped. And so I think it's like time for all of us to move to a new way of doing vendor risk management. And so at Vanta, we support more of a continuous process for checking controls. So, as we think about building out aspects of continuous monitoring, we also think about how we can make this continuous monitoring more public in nature. Today, for us at Vanta, we have this trust center. On the trust center, you can go out there, you can see all of the controls that we have in place, and it has these little green checks by the controls. I don't think a lot of people know this, but those green checks are actually tied directly to continuous monitoring that we're doing internally. And so think like at the simplest form, like a configuration check, like is encryption on or off? And then that check runs and it populates that little green check mark on the Trust Center on the external website. So at any point in time, our prospects and our customers can go to that Trust Center and get a real-time view of like our control posture. I think this is like a really great first step, but I almost would love to like see us push the needle further and get to a spot where we're even more transparent about what's happening within the organization. This is not something that's super comfortable for a lot of security teams, but it is like the spot that we need to get to. I think we have done this process of sending out the questionnaire, getting responses, doing an audit, asking for evidence. It's all very, very time consuming. And at the end of the day, it's still just point in time. I think that whole process needs to change. We need to get to a much more sustained model. I mentioned continuous checks of the different controls and really focus on like transparency of sharing that with prospects and customers.
Have you been hanging out in my office? Because everything you just said, we've been talking about. But yes, the rubber stamp, SOC 2. What does that even mean? Yes, all the things. So you mentioned, as far as continuous monitoring, of course, there's like the core controls, CIS controls, all that, critical controls. So, what would you want to see as a customer as far as that ongoing authorization, continuous monitoring when we're talking about vendor risk?
Yeah, this is the other part that I think is really important. It isn't a one size fits all, and it probably shouldn't be. And so I really think companies need to take a step back and they need to say, like, okay, how am I using this vendor? And like, what data am I giving this vendor? And if this vendor, has some sort of terrible outage, like, how is it going to impact my business? And like, those are the most important questions. The question on like, are you using split tunneling on your endpoints? That question probably doesn't matter. And so I think we've been stuck in this state where it's like we've all ran around and handed out these 100 questionnaires and got answers and tried to find findings, and it's all been a lot of activity but not a lot of like impactful outcome. And so I think we need to just like flip this whole thing on its head and really think about like what are the things that like we want our vendors to tell us transparently. And then once they do tell us transparently the answers, we need a way to just like monitor that those things always stay in place and they're continuously monitored. I can log in to like some portal and see the state of my vendors. One of the things that we're doing working really closely with the Federal Project Management Office is on FedRAMP 20X. And this program is so focused on this continuous monitoring aspect, but it's also focused on like displaying the status of all your controls. And so you think of like a potential agency that wants to buy Vanta, wouldn't it be great if they could just come in like an auditor would and they can see every single one of our controls, how the control is continuously tested, the evidence that supports it, the test that's running in the background, like that is like true vendor risk management that like drives a very solid like outcome and has like the deep visibility that I think folks need.
Like I throw out the traditional documentation like a system security plan and the questionnaires and the SOC 2 reports and whatnot, or and have a way to, so it would be the vendor would be responsible for updating it too, right? Whether it's every quarter, every month. So I guess, yeah, some people might have a hard time grasping what the difference is, you know, based on how we've been doing things, right? Because they can tell us anything. And like you said, it is a touchy subject because I'm not going to give everybody our tenable scans, right? I'm not going to give everybody, access to our firewall configuration files, things like that. So I do think there's a fine line there, but I like where you're going with that. So it's really heavy on the transparency and the continuous part, not just a one time at point in time, as you mentioned, one time doing one third of the controls kind of deal, right? So I guess that's probably where the main difference is, the transparency and the continuous monitoring.
100%. Yeah, I think the continuous monitoring is the most important part. Um, Even if I ask you all the questions and you say all the right answers, tomorrow all of those things could be different. And so to me
Exactly.
it's not even like quarterly. It's like how do we check these things a couple times a day? How do we, display where we're at? So I think that, you know, with the entrance of like AI, there's a lot of ways that we can deliver this, and we can deliver this in like a much more real time way.
You said it first. I was going to
Yeah.
ask your thoughts on AI here. How that's a game changer. How do you think, or how have you seen AI as a game changer from the traditional third party risk management to where we are now and where are we going?
Yeah. I can't believe we got this far, and this
Without
is like
saying it right.
the first time it's coming up. It's crazy. Um, okay, so my thoughts on AI. I think that this is the most impactful technology I'll probably see in my lifetime. Like this is a true game changer in so many different ways. The things that like I've been able to like explore and play around with, and I haven't written a substantial amount of code in a very long time, and with an afternoon, I can sit down and create an app in like just an afternoon, and my app is really good. Like that is going to change so many different things. I think in the world of like vendor risk management, there's a ton of opportunity for like AI to play a role. Today, we're sort of like applying AI to the vendor risk management processes that we've all come to accept. And so the passing around the questionnaire, the filling in the questions, yes, AI can do all of those things. I would love to see us in a world where we're not applying to AI to processes we don't like, and instead we're like rethinking the process entirely. And so as we think about like this new world where we can continuously monitor controls, how many of those controls can be monitored by AI? Probably a lot. And so like I would love to like take the application of AI that we have today with questionnaires and filling in questionnaires and passing back questionnaires, and really think about like, okay, maybe that works for like low risk vendors, but like, is there a different application of AI in the vendor risk management space that is way beyond that?
Yeah, I agree. I in my head, I always just think of like Gen AI, making things so simple, like asking which based on my company size and my company services and my company's data, what's the best vendor for this particular service, or what's the best product for this particular need that I have, or what would you suggest that, or how should I remediate this control, and what's a good partnership to seek, and then continue on there. I just feel like that's like so great when we can be doing that, but also the data that we are ingesting into these models is critical, right? Making sure that good data, and then we get that output that is substantial, and brings value. And I feel like your whole conversation just now, or the whole response to third party risk management and vendor risk management, is that where's the value at when we're doing these
Mhm.
questionnaires? What value is this really bringing when an individual company, especially some of these small and medium businesses, it could be devastating if they get into a partnership with a vendor that then gets compromised, and their reputation, their data, their services are impacted. So as far as your role there, CISO at Vanta, again, you're living these things every day, and the actual product that's going out the door. So I would assume, I imagine that this everything we just talked about is incredibly important to you, and you're able to pass along those lessons learned, and the value of your experiences to the actual product, and then that goes out the door. Just curious, like from a customer perspective, like what's the feedback that you get on that?
On the product overall, or
The fact that how your company's structured, and I'm sure that you are
Mm.
out, at other conferences, and shaking hands with customers, and telling your story. What's some of the feedback you've gotten from those folks on the outside about how your company is structured and how you're involved every step of the way?
Yeah, people love Vanta, like really love Vanta. And the one thing that like I was really attracted to coming to Vanta is I think a lot of companies have a principle of put the customer first. And at Vanta, that principle is like true throughout like every single conversation every single day. And the one thing that I think is like so unique about Vanta is many companies like you get a certain number of customers or a certain number of revenue and you think you like know better than the customer, and that is not something I could ever see Vanta doing. Vanta is kind of holds on every word the customer is saying, listens very intently to like what the customer is telling you, whether that customer is like me and my team or another company that we're working with. The way that like we listen intently is like really really surprising. And so I think that I hear that feedback from the people that we work with. We have a big customer conference, and it's amazing to just hear from those customers like how happy they've been with Vanta. Don't get me wrong, like not every customer is happy with Vanta. I mean, there's certain things that they might have a bad experience or whatnot, but the feedback that we get from customers is so positive, and it's just cool to see like that, again, like we get to be part of like helping customers with like a product that just makes their lives easier.
Well, there you have it. Hearing from a CISO of the company that builds GRC trust platforms for other businesses to use, that actually uses the product. I love that so much. I'm a huge fan, JD. This has been so great. There's a lot of gems here, I believe our listeners can take away. Um, I always like to ask my guests this question, JD, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what would your current self tell your 18-year-old self? What advice would you give her?
Mm. Oh gosh, I have an 18-year-old right now, so this is advice I feel like I give her all the time. Um, I think. when you're 18, there's just the world's your oyster. You have so many like cool decisions to make. And sometimes I think for many people at 18, it can be overwhelming and induce a lot of anxiety. And I think just stepping back and like realizing every one of these decisions is a good decision. Like you're not choosing bad or good, you're choosing good or good. And so, embrace that. Like every opportunity that you have is like a decision of, do I go to this school or that school? Guess what? They're both good choices. Or do I take this job or that job? Both good choices. And so, every decision that you have when you're 18, I think is should be met with just like opportunity over anxiety.
I love that. I feel like I could use that advice pretty much every day of my life still. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well put. Shout out to your 18-year-old. I hope she chooses the right school. Both are good choices, as you say. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, JD, for hanging out with us. Really, it's been a great conversation. Look forward to meeting you sometime. Hopefully, we cross some paths. Be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome. Very, very fun to hang out with you. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody who's been listening and watching. We'll catch you next time for next month's episode of CISO Stories Podcast. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories Podcast. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories Podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode. Thanks for joining.